We are going to cover who a mandated reporter is, what to look for, and what to do. As educators, you are all considered mandated reporters, which means you are required to report any suspected child abuse or neglect. I want to emphasize that at no time should you conduct an investigation into child abuse or neglect. Your job is to report any possible child abuse or neglect to the appropriate agency. You all play a key role in both detecting and helping abused children. By having daily contact with children and adolescents, you have the opportunity to observe changes in both appearance and behavior that others may not notice. This puts you in a position where you may be the only one who can save a child. In this section, we will learn about the Child Abuse and Neglect Act, mandated reporters' responsibility, obstacles to reporting, testifying in court, who is a mandated reporter, what is child abuse, who are child abusers, physical abuse and injury, and abusive head trauma. The first child abuse reporting laws in California was enacted in 1963 and pertained only to physicians. It mandated that physicians report evidence of physical abuse. As knowledge and understanding of child abuse increased over time, it became evident that other professionals might also be in a position to identify maltreatment. There was a substantial increase in the number of professional groups who were designated in state laws as mandated reporters. The expansion of these groups of mandated reporters was accompanied by the broadening of the concept of reportable maltreatment to include sexual abuse, emotional maltreatment, and neglect. The Child Abuse and Neglect Act was passed in 1980. There have been numerous amendments since 1980 that have expanded the definition of child abuse and the persons required to report. There have also been clarification for procedures for reporting. In California, certain professionals are required to report known or suspected child abuse. However, anyone can report. It is imperative that mandated reporters stay on top of periodic amendments to the law. Therefore, SCO will have annual mandated reporter training. Mandated reporters who work at a licensed child care facility and are making a child abuse report about a child at the facility must file 2 separate reports. One report to the Child Protective Agency and one report to that facility's local licensing office. That means, in addition to reporting suspected child abuse to a child protection agency, licensed child care facility staff are also required by the California Code of Regulations, Title 22, to report to their facility licensing office anytime a suspected child abuse or neglect report is made. Reporting to the facility's local licensing office alone does not fulfill the mandated reporting requirements for child abuse and neglect. Your responsibility as a mandated reporter is to report any and all possible abuse or neglect. One of the biggest obstacles to reporting may be the feelings of the reporter. It is important to remember that the intention of a child abuse report is to protect the child, not punish the family. When reports are made, Child Protection Agency workers can investigate and, when appropriate, intervene to provide services and education for parents. Those required to report should be aware that reporting doesn't always mean that a civil or criminal proceeding will be initiated against a suspected abuser. If an investigation does not reveal evidence of child abuse, the case may be closed and no further action taken. In cases of intrafamiliar abuse, Child Protection Agency workers can assess a family's need and provide appropriate services, referrals, and education. Seeing a child with injuries or hearing of a child tell of an abusive or neglectful act can be heart-wrenching. While it is important that child care providers control their emotional responses in front of the child, it is also important that the providers have a place to express their thoughts and feelings regarding their concerns. Questions about reporting processes and what happens next may also arise and need to be addressed. Substantiated cases of child abuse and neglect may be litigated in criminal court, family court, juvenile court, and other legal arenas. When these cases go to court, mandated reporters may be asked to provide testimony. You may receive a subpoena requiring you to appear in court to testify as to the context and content of the child's disclosure of abuse, as well as your knowledge of the family and the child. It is important to be familiar with your agency's procedures for receiving and responding to subpoenas. 3-year-old David arrives at Head Start tearful and upset. You notice that he has a red mark on his face and appears to be favoring his left arm. His mother explains that he's fine and is crying because he got in trouble for wetting his pants and making them late. You ask the child if any parts of his body hurt, and he indicates his arm, but does not provide a verbal response. When you ask how he got hurt, he appears frightened and does not answer you. Although you have had concerns about David's care in the past, this is the first time you've noticed possible injuries. What should you do? You must make a report of suspected child abuse. David should be seen by a doctor to assess his injuries and evaluate for possible physical abuse, and further investigation needs to be done to ensure his safety. The child at your Head Start has been absent for a few days, and when he returns to school, you notice that he has a bruise on his cheek and arms. When you ask about his injury, he tells you that his father hit him. What are you obligated to do? Based on this information, you are mandated to report suspected child abuse, as the child has both made a verbal disclosure of abuse and has a visible injury. In this example, the child has an observable injury. However, it is not necessary to observe injuries to report. Note, if a child recants, takes back a disclosure of abuse, it does not eliminate the possibility of abuse. There is a long list of who a mandated reporter is, but these are some of the ones that SCO is associated with. Being a mandated reporter means that you play a very serious and important role in the lives of all the children that you work with. You are their lifeline to help and safety if they find themselves in a dangerous situation. Many of these children will be afraid to come forward because they've been threatened by their abusers to keep silent, and so it's your responsibility to take notice of the warning signs of child abuse and report anything that you suspect. What is child abuse? Child abuse includes physical injury, sexual abuse, neglect, willful cruelty or unjustifiable punishment, unlawful corporal punishment or injury. Abuse can be an act or failure to act which presents an imminent risk of serious harm. Abuse and neglect can also lead to the death of a child. Child abuse occurs in all cultural, ethnic, occupational, and socioeconomic groups. It is not just the parents who are the culprits. Children can become victims of abuse by persons in non-parental relationships, such as family friends, neighbors, acquaintances, or strangers. Those who abuse children may also be trusted to care for our children, such as teachers, child care providers, or foster parents. They may be male or female, they may be adults, teenagers, or even another child. What is physical abuse or injury? It is the bodily injury inflicted by other than accidental means on a child or another person. It may be a result from a single incident or multiple incidents. Note that the above bruising only refers to ambulatory and mobile children. Any kind of bruise on an infant is uncommon and should raise suspicion. Additionally, abusive bruises and burns may be a pattern or have a distinct outline, while accidental bruises typically do not leave a clear pattern or outline. However, abusive injuries are not always patterned and may look very similar to accidental bruises. Other types of injuries and red flags for possible physical abuse may include broken bones, cuts, unexplained bruises, burns from cigarettes, scalding water, or iron, any injury with an improbable explanation, an injury that is unusual for the child's age, a history of previous or recurrent suspicious injuries, a parent or caregiver who delays or fails to seek medical care for the child's injury, a statement by the child that the injury was caused by punishment or violence. In some situations, you need to call for emergency medical attention to prevent further injury or death if a child in your care has a serious injury. For example, head injury, broken bone, or a serious burn. The developmental abilities of a child should be considered when evaluating injuries. Keep in mind that for very young infants, any injury, even a small bruise, is concerning. This is because young infants are not mobile and are completely dependent on their caregivers. A study done in 2013 concluded that previous sentinel injuries are common in infants who are later severely physically abused. Sentinel injuries was defined as a previous injury reported in the infant's medical history that was suspicious of abuse because the infant was not mobile, or because the explanation for the injury was not possible, or there was no explanation provided. The most common type of sentinel injury found was bruising at 80%, followed by injuries in the mouth at 11%, and other types of injuries at 7%. Shaken baby syndrome is now called abusive head trauma. It is a serious brain injury resulting from forcefully shaking an infant or toddler. It destroys a child's brain cells and prevents his or her brain from getting enough oxygen. Abusive head trauma is a form of child abuse that can result in permanent brain damage or death. Never shake a baby. Seek immediate medical help if you suspect a child has been injured by violent shaking.
If a baby or small child is violently shaken, the symptoms can vary from mild to severe. In some instances, there may not be any physical signs of injury, such as bruising, bleeding, or swelling. However, there are several immediate symptoms of shaken baby syndrome that have been identified. These symptoms include uncontrollable crying, inability to be consoled, extreme irritability, lack of responsiveness, tiredness, lack of movement, inability to stay awake, poor appetite or feeding problems, breathing problems such as irregular breathing or not breathing at all, convulsions, vomiting, pale or bluish skin, bruising such as grab marks on the arms or chest, a forehead that appears larger than usual or a soft spot that seems to be bulging, inability to lift their head, tremors or shaking, inability to focus or follow movement with their eyes, limp arms and legs, rigid posture, unconsciousness, or coma. It's important for parents and caregivers to be aware of these symptoms and seek treatment for the child if the baby has been shaken. Seeking immediate medical attention is crucial in cases of shaken baby syndrome.